Welcome to Live with Living Cities, the podcast where we share stories and conversations with the leaders, innovators, and communities reshaping how capital flows in America. I'm your host, Justin Charles. At Living Cities, we believe capital isn't neutral. It reinforces inequity and helps dismantle it. Today's guest is someone who is reimagining what venture capital can look like when it centers people and communities too often left behind. Sydney Thomas is the founder and general partner of Symphonic Capital, an early-stage venture firm investing in companies that close access gaps in healthcare and financial services. Her fund is focused on the 99%, the everyday people who deserve reliable healthcare and financial freedom, and not just a privileged few. And Living Cities is proud to be an investor in Symphonic Capital's inaugural fund, aligning our missions to build systems where impact and returns are not in conflict, but deeply intertwined. Sydney, welcome to Live with Living Cities. So, Sydney, for those who might be meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your journey into venture capital, and the work you're leading now at Symphonic Capital?
Happy to. So I am originally from San Diego, California, born and raised. Proud Padres fan now that they've finally got their act together and are interesting. And my parents, though, are not from San Diego. My mom is from West Virginia and my dad is from Denver. We moved out here because my dad got a job in nephrology. He's a retired physician. And so I spent a lot of my childhood around the healthcare system, in and out of dialysis clinics, which was very interesting to me. And I also spent a lot of my childhood actually in West Virginia. And so my mom would take us back every year for summer where I'd get to hang out. Somebody introduced me to the term cousin camp, and that's what we would have, cousin camp, where just hanging out with the cousins in my grandparents' house. And that also exposed me to just what life looked like for so many other folks in the U.S. I think that West Virginia has had a particularly difficult journey, and especially in the last couple of decades with the opioid epidemic. And so these were two pillars of interest that I had through just my own exposure to these things from a young age. Decided to study them more in college. I went to Duke undergrad and studied public policy because to me, what it seemed like was influencing both this health and wealth category, these categories that I was really influenced by or interested in were government policies. And I could actually have a real impact if I went into the government side and wanted to play a part in our systems that way. Went to New York City, worked in the Bloomberg administration for about 5 years and learned so much. A big thing that I learned there was that it really does take both sides of the aisle to do the work. And in that case, I'm not even referencing Democrats versus Republicans. I'm actually talking more about the private sector and the public sector. And to realize I didn't have much exposure to the private sector. And so in order to actually do this work more effectively, I'd need to get that experience. So that influenced and made me decide to go to business school. Came back to California, went to Berkeley for business school, spent those 2 years really in experimentation mode. I spent most of my time at business school, out of business school, at different internships across the country, and also because it was at Berkeley in Silicon Valley, and got bit by the Silicon Valley bug of building companies that would influence and inform this world building that you wanted to see exist. And went to my desk. This was 2015. Cold emailed, I think, and over the course of, days, maybe weeks, hundreds of people in venture, because I didn't know anybody there. I just knew I was very intrigued, for coffee chats. And those coffee chats led to opportunities for me to start asking people for jobs. And one of those folks pointed me in the direction of the first job that I got in venture capital, which was in early 2016 And so I spent about close to a decade at a firm, the firm that I worked for before launching Symphonic Capital, learning everything I could, literally turning over every single rock to understand, like, what am I missing? What do I like, making sure that I knew every single thing I needed to before launching my own fund. And I'm so, I think that influenced so much of what we are building at Symphonic Capital. And also, I think really helped me have the resolve to continue doing Symphonic Capital, even when it was hard, especially in those early days. I launched Symphonic Capital in 2023, which, according to the data, is literally the worst year to launch a venture capital firm, I think, ever. And I got a lot of questions from folks. They're like, are you sure? You still want to do this? And it was just so clear to me that the answer was yes, because I had done my homework. And now we are launched. We have fully closed Fund 1, invested in about 21 companies. I have a great team. And what we've built, I think, is incredibly special. But it's because had, I think, a pretty unique trial by fire in our earliest days that helped us, I think, build stronger.
Oh, wow. Like that is tenacity. That is tenacity right there. And just a very inspirational story, like, by your own bootstraps kind of thing. So thank you for sharing. For our listeners who may not be familiar, can you explain in sort of plain terms what venture capital actually is and why it matters?
What allowed me an entry point into venture capital was actually seeing some of the parallels between what VCs were doing and what philanthropists were doing. Because my background was on the government side, which meant I had a lot of exposure to the nonprofit side and also the philanthropy side. We were raising money. We were working with different organizations in New York City. And the philanthropists who I talked to were really focused on investing in ideas, investing in theories of change, investing in these kind of like network of organizations that actually could reflect the type of world that they wanted to see exist. And I think it's the exact same ethos that exists in venture capital. It's just swap out organizations for businesses. But a lot of that fundamental kind of perspective is the same. I'm investing in companies that are creating this future that I want to see exist because they have building with values. They're great people, one, and I want to be in community with them and I want to see them succeed. And also they're building what I think can become really large businesses in the United States. So I think there's a lot of parallels there. And it's just that sometimes VCs use special words and it sounds fancy or different, but I think a lot of it is actually the same.
You mentioned your father and your parents. Your father, I believe he was the first Black chief of staff at Scripps Mercy Hospital in San Diego. And you mentioned your mom growing up with limited resources in West Virginia and going there and experiencing it in the scene. You shared the memories that you just discussed of walking the halls of dialysis clinics and seeing many patients of color and people and wondering why the access looks so unequal. So in that, would it be possible to dive in a bit more into exactly how those experiences pushed you towards your mission that you carry today and of Symphonic Capital?
The biggest part is that really it was just, it inspired a level of curiosity that I think was the most interesting aspect, where I was seeing these differences play out so clearly in my own life that it was really made me curious as to the why behind them. Any kid, like 4 or 5, why? Like that is the underlying question behind their existence. And I guess I just didn't really grow out of that.
Yep. I have 2 small kids under 5 years old. That is absolutely correct. And it's important to set up and specifically for the future generations. A lot of impact had come from just simply asking the question why and just a dogged pursuit of that answer. Thank you very much for sharing that. So thinking about capital and starting your own business and building your business up, what was your experience like when it came to accessing capital to start Symphonic Capital? Was it like straightforward, or were there unexpected hurdles you had to overcome?
I think when you're asking for capital, it's always an extremely vulnerable experience. And so for me, a lot of it was getting comfortable with becoming that vulnerable so consistently. I think there's some people who can do this and it's like just, I don't know, they don't feel any real impact of that ask, but I do. And so for me, I know the trade-off that person is I'm asking that person to make by investing in my fund versus doing something else. I feel an immense amount of responsibility to that person once they say yes. And the vulnerability comes from the fact that I'm also explaining to this person, like, I need you in order for me to execute this vision of mine. And it really is like asking people to help you make your dreams come true. And as someone who's always, been the person who's helping everyone else make their dreams come true, it's a very different uh, hat to put on when you're the one in the asking seat. And I would think I was realizing just how comfortable that other seat is, where you're in kind of like this helper state, or how comfortable it was starting to feel, maybe too comfortable, frankly, for me to be in that helper seat versus the owner seat. And I'm now loving it, but I think there was definitely a lot of this growth journey for me of just being that open to sharing, like, no, my dreams deserve investment. This idea deserves investment. You are making a good decision. I will be responsible with your money. All of these things I knew to be true. And, um, it's just a different hat, like I was sharing before.
I can definitely understand that perspective. And so you go into asking for these funders with that sort of sincerity and that sort of earnestness within your mission. So how is that received most often? And how do you navigate the no's? How many were yeses? How difficult was it to actually get people to say yes once you decided to sit down and say, hey, my dreams deserve to be funded as well? How difficult or easy was it?
Oh, it was incredibly difficult. As I shared earlier, I launched a fund in literally the worst year to launch a fund in close to 30 years, if not ever. And for folks who know venture, this is a little redundant, but for folks who don't, it might be useful. The zero interest rate environment of 2020 and 2021 enabled a lot of new funds to get launched because the um, cost of capital had gone down. And so institutions were being more open with investing in a higher risk um, asset class. Individuals were being more open. And a number of fund managers saw this opportunity and ran into it. And it was so smart for them. It was so smart. I watched it as an observer and knew it wasn't sustainable, but didn't really have a perspective of how it would impact me until I launched Symphonic. And what I realized once I started pitching folks was that a lot of the people who had been very active investors of those fund managers in 2020 and 2021 were completely over allocated to venture capital as an asset class. And so they were rethinking their own asset allocation strategy. They were starting to invest in different, like private credit started to balloon during this time. So because the interest rate had gone higher, so it's actually a pretty secure and good return in private credit compared to this unclear return in venture capital. And it was just interesting to be so much more of an active participant in it this time around because I completely saw that. It made sense. I was like, okay, yep, makes sense. And so in my head, really what it meant was like, who are the folk who real like it required a different focus on who I was pitching. And so I needed to get really clear around who this was exciting for. And it was largely exciting for folk whose whole job is investing into venture because those folks, fund of funds, they knew that this was actually the best year to be investing in venture when nobody else was investing in venture, because that means the underlying companies are priced more accurately. That means that folks aren't investing in hundreds of companies anymore. They're just scaling back. They're being a lot more diligent and deliberate about who they back and the decisions behind how they like make that analysis. And it was definitely really hard, but I think we ended up with the right crew because this crew got it, and I didn't have to. I could just kind of do my job with them instead of trying to, try and over explain myself with them.
Gotcha. That's excellent. So follow-up question to that, given that experience, how did that shape how you support founders and, today Symphonic Capital does?
Well, a big part of it was that it forced me, the difficulty in fundraising forced me also to get really clear on what we're building. We needed to get focused because we had a really specific amount of resources and I wanted to be really intentional about those resources. That informed our decision to start backing companies that are post-product, pre-product market fit is the way we describe them, which means that the company has launched, they've built something, but it's not up and to the right just yet on a revenue growth perspective. And what they need is support around helping them get there, which is a bit more hands-on and requires, I think, some operator background. And that actually informed my decision to work with my partner, now co-GP Shruti Shah, on these companies because she actually is a former founder herself. And so she's able to come to these conversations with the founders with a lot more perspective on what actually they need to succeed. And it also allows us to have like a shortened window, around like how these companies, around whether or not these companies are going to be successful. When you're investing in a company at pre-seed, like you technically do, quote unquote, pre-seed has become such a chasm that you can be investing in a company that has an idea, like a founder who's still working their full-time job and has an idea and looking for like $500K to just get going. Or you could be investing in this crew of folks that we're talking about, this post-product, pre-product market fit. To get from idea to post-product, pre-product market fit sometimes takes years, literally years. And so there was a lot of chaos involved in idea stage companies. The founders pivot quickly, they pivot frequently, they are a little less grounded in a truth of what they're building because they're still learning of what they are building, versus founders who have built something, have been through that already, and they're focused. And that is actually also the type where I like working with founders. I think they're more interesting, frankly. I think there's like more meat on the bone that we can talk about. And so it's been really fun to focus there, but that took trial and error to get there too.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. And that also kind of like parallels like one of your recent LinkedIn posts. You talked about how you coming into venture capital without family wealth gave you a really different focus, one that's about building long-term, durable value for families and communities. So that completely ties into that. Excellent. So you've been outspoken about seed strapping, raising only what you need, scaling intentionally, and avoiding the hype cycles that have tripped up so many companies. So for listeners who may not know about that term, can you break it down and explain why you're such an advocate for it?
Okay, so seed strapping is essentially saying that it's a combination of two words. One, bootstrapping, which is that the founder is generally used for founders who raise no outside capital. They are maybe doing this as a side hustle and using their wages to invest in the company until the company has gotten to a certain place where it can be profitable and they can start hiring people. And seed stage companies are generally founders who have raised seed financing, which is anywhere between $1 to $3 million, sometimes as large as five. I think that seed strapping is actually really interesting now because founders saw what happened in the ZERP environment. Founders also got hit really hard after the ZERP economy changed. They also previously were able to raise capital much easily. And it's always hard to raise capital. I don't want to knock anybody's hustle and say like they were able to raise money and it was just like an overnight success. I'm sure it was challenging. And statistically speaking, the data says that it is much more challenging to raise capital now than it was then. And because it's more challenging, founders are thinking much more critically about their risk reward of even raising capital. They're like, well, I could spend 6 months trying to pull together this Series A round, or I can be really intentional about this seed round that I raised, which was $1 to $3 million, and grow thoughtfully and get to profitability, start investing the money that we raise, that we're now making into the continued growth of this company until it becomes undeniable to even maybe a private equity shop. And we sell once we're at 100 million in ARR. There's just so many different things that founders can do now because they're starting to think through seed strapping. Versus what was considered before just the thing that every founder did, which was you raise pre-seed, and then you raise seed, and then you raise Series A, and then you raise Series B, and then you raise Series C, and then eventually you IPO. That rubric is gone. It is no longer the case. And I love that because it now means that founders can raise on their own based off of when, why, and how much they actually want to raise instead of just following, I think, blindly this crowd. So it's a really awesome time to be investing. I'm really excited to be investing right now.
Awesome. And you do definitely sounded excited. Moving on to ecosystem building, like our team here at Living Cities first met you at the Builders and Benefactors Gathering back in 2019 in Miami. That's a community of investors and fund managers of color dedicated to closing income and wealth gaps. So I'd like to know what impact being part of that network have on your journey specifically.
Oh man, that was an amazing network. Absolutely amazing. I think like Melissa Bradley was there, Keisha Cash was there, Jim Castleberry was there, Jewel Parks was there. Like it was such a room of heavy hitters that it was a little overwhelming. And for me, as someone who hadn't yet really done the fundraising journey, there were also a lot of philanthropies in there. And so I was able to ask them these really interesting questions around what does it look like for folks to raise capital from you? What could it look like? What would you like it to look like? We got to be in a room where we were all just, both tethered to the realities and also dreaming a lot. And it was just so much fun to be dreaming with those folks for a few days in Miami and then continue to remain close to many of them. So really grateful for that opportunity.
It's excellent. We interviewed Jim on this podcast a couple of episodes ago. So he's I can definitely understand why he's very much a presence. Thank you. Beyond writing checks, you've built a podcast, a newsletter, and convenings to build community. Why do you see storytelling and ecosystem building as central to your work as an investor?
You need to tell people where you're going. Then they need to understand where you're going. If folks don't get it, you might get where you're going, but you'll be alone. And then will you really have had the impact that you wanted to have? I think to me, this work is like movement building work. Like I'm building a movement of people who align with my values, with this future world that we're going to. They don't need to be perfectly aligned. We're going to have disagreements. That's the point. Any movement does. And you need folks to come along with you in order to have, I think, the greatest impact that you can have. So and a lot of that work has transitioned to offline work where we host now conferences, and we hosted an abundance retreat a few years ago where we were focused on how are we reframing our idea of capital as being in a space of abundance, because if you look at the data, we truly are. America has so much money, so much money. We are not in any deficit. And so when we reframe that, what can we believe to be true? What can we view? What can we see in our own horizon for ourselves and for our companies and for our co-investors? We also have a health equity summit that we host where we bring together folks to just kind of talk about and honestly debate around like what is the role of venture capital in health equity? What is the role of like how are we going to re how are we going to think about building right now? Because it's a really interesting moment in history. It's just like I think that I love in-person stuff because I think that's one just where people really are human. I think, right? It's just so much when you leave so much work to be done online, I think, don't get some of the hardest work done. Um, and I'm not going to turn this into an in-person office, remote office debate because I still am very pro remote office. And I think there's something really important and critical about those in-person touch points, those in-person relationships, those hard conversations that if you don't have them, you don't you don't get anywhere. You just are stuck.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Thank you for that. You've also been recognized by Black VC and by Mary Claire for your leadership. So there's very much congratulations on that. What role do you think representation plays in reshaping who gets to lead in venture capital?
The way that I talk about my leadership style at Symphonic is it's very informed by me being the oldest sister. And when I was younger, literally like as early as I can remember, I was told to share with your sister, help your sister, support your sister, teach your sister. There was this expectation on me that I was going to be collaborative. I've never had an expectation of me that I would be any other way. And so my leadership style is inherently collaborative because I've been learning this skill for 35 plus years. And so when I build a collaborative fund that is focused on sharing leadership, sharing power, building ecosystems, I think that enables other people who didn't see themselves in this narrative that oftentimes gets pushed in the venture community of one guy genius, solo guy genius, both on the VC side and on the founder side, where it's just like you think about the Mark Zuckerberg, you think about these folks who are just like solo guy genius figures it out. And when you see someone like me, I think it enables folks who might have a different perspective of what leadership looks like and should be, get the permission to lead the way they would like to lead.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for that. So you've already invested in companies like Canopie, which makes perinatal mental health care accessible to new and expecting mothers, and Scout, which helps student athletes make smarter financial decisions. And Symphonic was also part of a recent $8 million Series A for Lōvu Health. That's tackling maternal health inequities with AI-powered monitoring and navigation. So what excited you most about these companies, and how does their success illustrate the kind of founder and solution Symphonic wants to champion?
We're so excited about the portfolio, and Lōvu's growth is just extraordinary. One of the things that, and I think she's a really great example, the founders there are a really great example of our focus around this post-product, pre-product market fit. They had built the thing, they were testing it in a few different health systems, and they needed capital to refine their sales strategy and continue to grow and build. And they did just that, grown extraordinarily well in the last year. And we're really excited to have co-led the seed round before this round and then double down on the Series A that they just did a few months ago. A similarity across all three of these founders, too, is that they all have one word we use really frequently in how we define our favorite, like the founders who we back, are proximate founders. We like to back founders that are proximate to the problem that they're solving. Because when you're proximate to that problem, you have out, you have a competitive advantage that somebody who is just been kind of following along on the sidelines can't replicate easily. You have this earned insight, which is something that Andreessen Horowitz shares of this like kernel of truth about this space, this industry, this consumer that other people can't just copy. And so I think you see that when in the founder of Scout, Michael, and his conversations with the players that he's working with, the conversations that he's having with them are so personal because he has been literally in their shoes. Noel and Santosh at Lōvu. Santosh is a clinician. Noel has been in health systems for decades. And similarly with Anne at Canopie, she has been working in this mental health space for years. And so we don't back folks who are, tepid, like still trying to test it out, still just thinking they might do this for fun. Like that's not it for us. Somebody else can do that. We back founders who are all in, deep and committed, and have shown it through their work, not just their words, to the problems that they're solving and for years. And that is the expectation. Um, and it's been so much fun because with those founders, you get these people who are very obsessive about a very hard problem that you also want to have solved. And so the conversations are different. The depth that they are able to go is different. It's just so much more fun for me.
It's that mixture of passion and intentionality, I imagine, right? You are, as you said, proximate to the problem. It's affected you. You are passionate about solving the issue, whatever the pain point is that you built your business around. You have a lot more invested in actually actually making it succeed than, I won't say much more than another person who's trying to do it, but you do have that added incentive there. Thank you for that. Looking ahead, you've advised founders to stay stubborn about their vision, to get their house in order with the unglamorous administrative side of building a business. Why do you consider that so important?
It's such a good question. And I think it's something that's been really under discussed for a long time. There's been this glorification of the idea guy and this kind of relegation of the operations person as if as if both aren't necessary to the success of any business. And if you don't know your numbers, if you don't know your operations, if you don't know how much it costs you to operate your business, you're going to be out of business.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. And so I think it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine because also it's very gendered. Usually the operations person is like some woman, usually she's chief of staff or EA or something. I don't know if she's like actually getting what the title she deserves, probably closer to a COO. And But I just think that there's a lot of COOs who could be exceptional CEOs. And I don't think that we give them as much kind of uh, respect, frankly, and also just, I think, acknowledgement of how necessary the things that they're doing are to the success of the company. Um, I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about how Oracle is recently going through this like co-CEO transition, which is very interesting. And they shared some stats that actually co-CEO models have outperformed solo CEO models. And I am curious. I did not dig in after the podcast, but I am curious about like how when it's a co-CEO, you're able to elevate some of those different skill sets that might have previously been relegated to the COO or chief of staff to the highest position in the organization, and how that actually enables the organization to run
More
better.
efficiently. Yeah. So, what about advice for other investors? If someone listening wants to do venture differently, to integrate equity into their investment strategy, what would you tell them?
My main perspective on this is that every investment that you are making will have impact. And so if you're not, and that can be neutral, negative, otherwise. But if you're not honest about the impact that you're making, if you're not thoughtful about the impact that you are having with that investment, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think impact investing is just a more honest conversation about how we actually are measuring the things that are going to happen, that we want to have happen by virtue of investing in this company. But all investing is impact investing. It's just, it might be bad impact or maybe neutral impact. But I don't think it's not just a group of investors. It's just a group of investors who are like um, actually really diligent about sharing out what the impact of their investing is.
Gotcha. Thank you. We at Living Cities were proud to be a limited partner in your first fund. From your perspective, and I know you touched a little bit about this a little earlier, but from your perspective, what role can philanthropy and collaboratives like ours play in supporting emerging fund managers like yourself?
I think you guys did a great job at supporting us. And so this is actually a good question for you guys.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, you're absolutely right. That is a question for us. Living Cities is actually very adamant that philanthropy has a big role in supporting not just emerging fund managers, but businesses in general, and making sure that everyone, everyone can achieve the American dream. It's not a pipe dream. It's not meant for some and not others. So we definitely support and definitely believe that philanthropy and collaboratives like ours play a huge role in that. And so much more of that, we need much more of that. So thank you for throwing the question back at me. So final question. When you think about your legacy, like 20, 50 years from now, because I believe you spoke about, not here necessarily, but in one of the things that I've listened to you, and you've spoken about having something that's multiple, like spanning multiple years, spanning multiple generations, building that sort of legacy. 20, 50 years from now, what do you hope Symphonic Capital stand for?
Mm-hmm. Well, 20, 50 years from now, I hope that Symphonic Capital stands for just first and foremost excellence, that our returns show for ourselves that we have returned significant capital back to our LPs and to ourselves as owners of this fund. And then I think that it's also a marker of how I hope that it stands for the same values that we stand for today. And the reason why we came up with the name symphonic is partly because of our obsession with excellence. When you think of a symphony, it's not the tier 10 person who's invited to be first chair. It is the best person for that role. The best oboist is first chair of the oboe. And we believe that we, are also building a high caliber of founders and with team members to actually execute on the work of our fund. And then I think the other piece is this, within a symphony, it is so clear that it's not going to be good if it's all oboists, right? Like it actually has to be a collection of oboists, violinists, pianists, trombone, French horn. Like it is the collection of this combination of difference that is actually what makes it so great. And that is also our perspective at Symphonic, which is that it's like this collection of really different instruments that is what is core to making it great. And I just want that to be, right now we're in the process of proving ourselves. And in 50 years, I want to be like, we did it. We proved it. Done. Next question.
I like the playing off a symphony metaphor, and especially on LinkedIn, you're listed as the conductor at Symphonic Capital. So that is a perfect dot on that I there. Thank you so much, Sydney. Thank you for sharing your story, your vision, and your wisdom with us. We appreciate you, and we hope you come back and talk to us at some future day.
Thank you, Justin. This was a lot of fun.
Symphonic Capital represents exactly the kind of systems change innovation we need, where founders, investors, and communities thrive together. To our listeners, if today's conversation inspired you, visit symphonicapital.com to learn more about Symphonic Capital and the work that Sydney and her partner Shruti Shah are doing. You can also explore how Living Cities is working to shift capital flows across the country at livingcities.org, or by following Living Cities on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And thank you, as always, for listening. If this episode resonated with you, share it with one person you think will enjoy it too. Because when we change how money moves, we change what's possible for cities, for communities, and for generations to come. I'm Justin Charles, and this has been Live with Living Cities.